Good evening once again. Or I guess more accurately, morning in this case. Yes, we're getting some bonus content tonight. I just got an email from Son Kelly from the mayor's office, and we're going to be meeting with him and talking turkey. So let's go ahead and make the call.
Good morning. This is Sloan Kelly.
Good morning, Mr. Kelly. This is Dr. Kail Avile.
Dr. Avile, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you this morning?
I am cold and wet because my vehicle is not at my apartment.
Oh, geez. Would you like to get somewhere? We can drive around and talk, or if you got somewhere to be?
I'm actually running my way to Town Hall if you want to meet there.
I could probably pick you up on the way.
Okay. I am at Rockford Plaza.
All right, I will be on my way momentarily.
Sounds great. See you shortly.
All right, see you then.
Bye.
Damn it, Rockford Plaza. My brain. I fucked up. I took the wrong... whatever. It'll be alright. Oh, wait, no, this is Legion Square, not Rockford Plaza. Rockford Plaza is the mall, I think. Great, I'm all over the place tonight. I need to get my freaking... ...933. Hello, hello.
Good morning.
Thank
Well, I
you for
guess
your
it's
email.
yeah, absolutely. I guess it's good evening for you, isn't it?
Uh, Somewhere in between.
Afternoon ish.
No, I mean technically it is morning. I just the way I approach time is more. It's not the next day until I've slept, and I have not.
Lovely. What makes you work the
The degenerate hours, as some people put it.
as some people put it? Yes.
Well, in fairness, it's mostly just that's when, to put it a bit crudely, that's when the brain juices are flowing the most.
Ah, okay. Yeah, I get it. Chemical compounds and all the things.
Exactly.
I understand. Yeah, I tend to wake up relatively early for the same reason. Somewhere between um, 4 and 5 a.m. Eastern time.
Mm.
Doesn't matter if I went to bed at 1 a.m.
Oh goodness. So there are nights when you sleep for 3 hours, and that's all that you're ever getting.
Yep.
That
Uh,
is not pleasant.
no, it's the worst. But it's what we do.
Yep. Well, and especially in your case, having the joy of being a civil servant adjacent, I believe would be the proper term.
Yeah, that's probably appropriate.
Oh, and just like that, it stopped raining. Now that you're not walking in it.
Right, exactly. Now that it would be fine. Yeah. So talk to me a little bit more about your campaign. I would love to hear a little bit more about it. And this is not coming from a perspective of competition. This is just genuine interest.
Of course. Oh my goodness.
Locals are insane.
Honestly, that local just gave us the perfect starting point. Because the kind of the initial core and a big part of my campaign is that I am running, essentially what I'm referring to as, um, based purely around the Clear Act, as I've dubbed it,
Okay.
which is about essentially taking the locals and finding a way to, rehabilitate and educate, as well as provide assistance for them, to try and, we because right now we are very much a fractured society. We
Right.
have our, immigrated citizens on one side of the fence, and we have our locals on the other side.
Okay.
And in having that schism there, we have a situation where neither side fully, trusts, fully, accepts the other, which has led to just, unfortunately, just senseless bloodshed, really. It's escalated from the point of where locals were afraid, they started arming themselves, they started acting in unpredictable, chaotic manners towards citizens responding to that, and it's all very messy, for lack of a better term.
Right.
It creates a situation where, there's a lot of bloodshed on both sides. There's definitely deaths on both sides. As a doctor, as a person who generally cares about people, it's just not good. It's just quite simply not good.
Welcome to my fake office, by the way. It's next to the voting booth.
It's nice as long as my being here and us talking isn't going to um affect voters in any way. Obviously, I want to make sure that I run a clean campaign.
Absolutely. Yeah, it shouldn't influence anyone, hopefully, and we would just stop talking in the end since someone walks in.
Oh, perfect, perfect. So yeah, that's essentially the core of my campaign, is through obviously my studies, medical school, taking some psychology degree work coursework as well, kind of getting a basis to understand kind of what makes locals tick, why they behave so, defensively and then aggressively towards us, and what we can do to reintegrate into a single unified society so that we can move beyond all this petty violence that turns into very real bloodshed.
Hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. I actually haven't had many run-ins with locals, just in my short time that I've been here,
Hmm.
other than maybe some instances where my car has been dinged. But for the most part, I've only heard of instances of locals pulling weapons. But
So what
the
I've
fact that you
found
hear it,
what I've found regarding locals pulling weapons, and obviously, with their driving, that was kind of one of the signs that things were getting more chaotic and more fractured. But what I've seen and what I've heard with locals pulling weapons is they do that when they feel threatened, or one of the newer things that we've been seeing is if they have kind of like a almost kind of like the gangs, like how you have the gangs have their turfs. If you have locals that live in those turfs, they feel like they've been adopted into part of that same gang, and so they
hmm,
kind of take on that, very it's almost like trying to talk about bees. It's very defensive, very territorial. That's the word I'm looking for.
interesting.
So if they see aggression or something that threatens their territory, that's when they pull weapons and start acting aggressively. Which I mean, I would presume, and obviously, I please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but you yourself do not seem like the sort of man that would go around spreading wanton violence. Um, so you,
Correct.
so you as a result would be far less likely to run afoul of such behavior.
So, if I mean, like, what are the circumstances you would typically see that? Is it carrying a weapon? Is it running into, a local? Is it some other circumstance?
So I've heard tell regarding like even simply brandishing a weapon, but certainly
Oh, interesting.
anything where they feel like where they are injured, like if let's say for example that one of our immigrated citizens were to run over a local, but they were to survive the impact, which is certainly of course possible depending on the speed of the impact. They may get up and start acting aggressively in obviously in self-defense at that point, one would say, but even after the situation would normally be considered kind of resolved, if it were between two immigrated citizens, they would still continue to pursue that aggression far beyond what would be normally considered reasonable. Or say, and this is something I haven't seen myself, but I've heard tell of, is if an immigrated citizen is carjacks a local, they may or does damage to the local's car, they may respond by getting out and taking aggressive action towards the immigrated citizen.
Interesting.
So I mean, in most cases, if not all, it's a situation where, let's be honest, the immigrated citizen is in fact the one who started the action, and it kind of ties into almost like a belief that locals are less than, which
Hmm.
creates obviously a situation where if it's treated like they're less than, then oh well, I mean, attacking them is fair game, stealing their cars fair game, murdering them is fair game, and they're treated in this way, and they are responding in self-defense.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think that's an area for exploration that maybe hasn't been even a topic of discussion um, broadly, but that's good to know.
Yeah, and I would definitely agree. One of the more common, it's almost like the kind of, and this is kind of where everything really needs to come to like a really strong point where we can kind of address that, but then we may also need additional legislation um to address the actions taken towards the locals, because essentially it's coming to a head where you've got that constant violence, um Sorry, I lost my train of thought for just a moment there.
Yeah, I was trying to get closer and jumped up on a chair. I apologize.
Oh no, no, you're fine. You're fine. That's I believe. Have you been in the city long or?
No, I actually, it's a strange circumstance that I ended up here. So prior to moving here, I was working in a remote capacity for Mayor Mickey, doing basically the
Mm-hmm.
same thing. He hired me as a political advisor.
Ah.
However, after coming here, I decided that it was probably not in my best interest to work directly for him, but rather establish a precedence for working for any possible mayor that would be in office. So I've set up a business as a political advisory or a consultancy, for lack of a better phrasing, um, for the purposes of what we want to accomplish in the city. I kind of have begun working on a lot of legislation that I don't think would be passed in any single term.
Mm-hmm.
Um, a lot of these conversations are just in the beginning phase. I've been talking for 2 or 3 weeks, basically my entire time in the city, on the same topic. Um, and we have like 13 pieces of legislation that really need to be reviewed in depth. Which basically means like if we're going to see change, it's going to not happen as fast as we want to, especially in the areas of like civilian improvements. Um, if I lock myself into one candidacy, unfortunately, then I'm afraid that things just wouldn't get finished. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm a completionist. I think that's kind of like I like to see things through. So if and some of these are Mayor Mickey's ideas, I'll confess to that. Um, at least they were incepted by him or inspired by him, which is great. So he'll get the credit for them, in theory. But the reality is, I don't want them to be things that got started and then when it came time for the next mayor to come in, whether that's um, Friday or Saturday or whatever next week, or in 60 days, whatever time frame they determine the next mayor to come in. Uh, Honestly, I want it to be something that's priority for us to continue working on. The way that that's going to happen is by having some ownership over it. Um, and that basically I think just lends itself to an understanding that like, hey, there is someone in this city who is basically a professional politician, um, which is a unique space as I understand it. There is no one who's really had that role in this city. We have professional lawyers, we have professional judges, we have elected mayors, but they have an extremely limited term. um,
Mm-hmm.
and so no one really gets to have that professional level of I do this for a living, so I have a vested interest beyond my term. And so when I moved here, that's kind of the role that I decided that I wanted. um, and so because there isn't one, I have decided to make it. It just will not be a government position, which is fine.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And I can definitely see the point in that, um, say, for example, as you said, if, if you're working with Mayor Mickey and be it next week or 2 months down the line, there were a new mayor, then everything that you had, worked on, but maybe not passed as yet, if you were working directly for mayor or for the mayor and not for the mayor's office, as the way I keep put
Yeah,
kind of make putting in my brain. If you were working directly for Mickey, the next mayor in line may say, "Oh, well, who are you? You were part of Mickey's campaign. I don't feel like I want you around." And then, as you
sure.
said, your work gets flushed down the drain. Anything that was not already codified.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's kind of the place that I'm trying to, as much as I am glad to work for him under his administration.
Mm-hmm.
There has to be a degree of separation, and so I continue to make sure I market myself as a political advisor first, and then an assistant to him, which is kind of like the duality of the role. Um, but I'm an advisor first, and part of that means, unfortunately, having to have some hard conversations with him about what's um, maybe areas of neglect inside his administration, areas of improvement, those kinds of things. and I would do the same for any other mayor, right? The expectation would be that, like, if you want to do this job and you want to do it well, there would be expectations imparted. I have spoken with Emma Gain. I've spoken with Sabbath Cohen, two of the previous sitting mayors. Actually, I spoke with
Hmm.
Denzel Williams as well.
Oh wow.
Um, so I've tried to get a better understanding of basically the entire landscape. The only person who I haven't spoken to, or two people I haven't spoken to, would be Abdul, who was impeached, and then Andy Jones, who was the first mayor.
Hmm.
Um, Otherwise, I've gotten a pretty good understanding. I have, however, spoken to a few deputies that sat under Abdul's administration and have pretty good relationships with them to understand some of the flaws of what happened and points of failure inside that administration. Um, and am trying to, I'll say, insulate and protect not just myself, but maybe other deputies who um, would have a fear of seeing the same kind of outcome in the future. So that's another priority of mine is we'll just say protection of the people who are in a capacity of service.
Essentially creating a situation where if they were following orders to the best of their ability and in good faith that it was the right thing to do, but the mayor were not to put like a specific, and obviously not saying this is the case, but if there were a case of malfeasance, then trying to create an insulation to where they are protected if their actions did not lead to it or were not affected by it.
Correct. And in the instance of Abdul, which is actually a very interesting case, he was funneling money through the casino
Oh wow.
that was basically just larger sums than it should have been, the way I understand it. But his entire administration got a really bad rap for it. There was no reason for that to have happened because it was the actions of an individual person. Um,
Yeah, and
and
I'm correct me if I'm wrong, but
mhm,
any type of appropriation of funds is the sole discretion of the mayor, not the deputies. Isn't that right?
correct. I think that the issue is what you can call a misappropriation of funds in the first place.
Hmm.
Um, because the fact of the matter is, you have to be able to prove it. And I think in Abdul's case, trying to go back and look at those case logs and case files, I'm not even entirely sure that his impeachment was really proven to be a misappropriation of funds as much as it was an overspending, um,
Ah,
which isn't really the appropriate grounds for what one might call embezzlement. However, I do understand the principle for overspending, uh, and so an interesting gray area that probably also needs to be discussed, legislated, or whatever it may be. However, there's been no one here to take a look at the finances in great detail. I'm certainly not going to be in a position to do that because I'm a private entity and um, I would be conflicted, I would say. Uh, However, if that's something that is determined to be a priority from any level, then I'm sure somebody could take a look at it.
yeah, absolutely. And I definitely get what you mean by, it's not in your best interest for you to step in and say, okay, guys, I'll handle it. Because, for one, yes, you are, at the moment, for lack of a better term, marketing yourself, branding yourself as a political advisor to the office of mayor. But to a lot of eyes, because you were an employee of Mickey before immigrating to the city, because you have worked exclusively for Mickey's mayoral team. Obviously, there
Right.
would be some heavy questions of possible conflict of interest, especially since you're
Absolutely.
also not a public servant.
Correct. Yeah, and that's going to be an interesting area of exploration as I further separate myself. I mean, it was a great opportunity. I was an intern on his campaign prior to coming
Hmm.
here, but my background prior to being an intern was I actually worked for the governor of San Andreas,
Oh,
and
wow.
so my goal in moving here in the first place was not to work on this administration in the same kind of capacity. It was to establish my business, which is a consulting business, um, which very quickly has happened, which is great. Um, and when I say political advisor, that's one component of the political landscape, right? The office of mayor is one area, but we also have a Senate. We also
Mm-hmm.
have a DOJ
Mm-hmm.
that technically falls within the landscape of politics and policy. Um, so trying to look more broadly outside the scope of, oh, I'm a servant to the office of the mayor. Um, I spend more time working at this juncture with the DOJ than I do the mayor's office.
Oh,
Um, and so I sit in, yes, I may sit outside the mayor's office and I may sit in this area, but I also sit right out there and um, spend a lot of time with the lawyers and judges and talk about their needs and what legislation may benefit them. And at the same time, what may benefit the city at large. And then in the end of the day, they're the ones who I may need to consult with more broadly on legislation scoping, because the fact of the matter is whatever you legislate has to hold up in court.
yeah,
And so as
absolutely.
a uh, and I would say a civil servant, but the fact of the matter is I'm not really a civil servant. I'm a civic servant, for lack of a better phrasing. Um, but as an entity who's interested in the civics of Los Santos, I have a vested interest to ensure that um, what work is getting accomplished is for the betterment of the city at large. It may go through the mayor's office, but it also is inclusive of basically every activity that is involved at City Hall.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes perfect sense.
I think it's really easy for folks to narrow the scope to one political office that they see. Right? Oh, we have a mayor, and that's it. Um, the politics of Los Santos is a bit broader than that, however.
Yeah, because of course, as you mentioned, you have DOJ, who, I mean, obviously, as we know, are elected officials. There's literally four seats on the ballot right this second.
Exactly.
You have the Senate, which, as I understand the structure, the senators are essentially judge pluses.
They are, for lack of a better phrasing, the entire ruling entity of Los Santos. What they say goes. So when we are creating policy, when we are discussing these topics, we are keeping in mind that there is the possibility of any discussion happening um, being shut down before it begins.
Yeah, kind of the way my mind thinks of it, and I mean, obviously, feel free to correct me if you have a different understanding, is that they tend to be something to the equivalent of like the U.S. Senate, while also combined with the U.S. Supreme Court.
Yes, and also probably the presidency. It's really all three branches wrapped into one. They can literally, without further cause or need to justify, just make decisions, executive level decisions,
Ah, so they're straight up judge, jury, and executioner. Excellent.
basically. They do. I mean, they do operate in a more democratic capacity. Not one singular senator is typically making a decision.
Hmm.
However, um, it only takes a small majority to make that decision, and there's only like five of them. So
So yeah, it's literally if three say yay, then yay it is.
exactly.
Okay.
But that's a good thing to note as we're making changes, and if you're elected, whether it be this term or in the future, um, the navigability of how we approach the Senate and what types of changes may need to occur in the city. They're also the ones that help us with city planning. The city planners are, I don't want to say outside the scope of what we're doing in politics, because they're actually very much involved in the politics of the city. As much as we are legislating, sometimes we're off like also including maybe programmatic changes or planning changes inside the scope of those legislations. Sometimes these things don't need to be legislated so much as they do need to be just city planning proposals. So those are other things that we're working on currently, and I would expect that kind of work to continue again. The biggest thing at this juncture is what will again benefit the population broadly versus what, and this is kind of where the uniqueness of this position comes in. Um, I advise, um, I advise on what may be a better solution than what has been suggested to me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, looking at the overall big picture rather than limiting yourself to, as we said before, rather than limiting yourself to one term or one mayor.
Exactly. Well, and again, this all stems from I worked directly with Mayor Mickey prior to moving to the city, and then after moving here, understanding the landscape of the city a little bit better. His ideas are very boisterous, um, and sometimes they're good, but they're also incomplete. And so he gives me a good framework, and then I can take that framework and expand upon it. And that's where the rest of my role comes in, is talking to everybody else and learning what would and wouldn't work, having the right conversations with the right um, powers that be. Maybe sometimes that's our justice system. Sometimes that's the individuals who are working the jobs that they would affect. Sometimes that's trying to figure out what industry it may indirectly affect. Uh, for instance, in our entire economic structure right now, um, trying to legislate a means of correcting the economy. That's a hard undertaking, but it's a necessary one. We don't really have a good middle class anymore.
Yeah, I would certainly agree. I feel like we still have the remnants of a middle class, but it's not, it's in shambles.
Yeah, and it's more isolated to a subgroup, right? When you think about a middle class, you should be thinking about a bell curve, right?
Yeah,
You should be
absolutely.
thinking about the middle class being the large majority of your population. Um, you should not be thinking about the inverse, right? You shouldn't be thinking about an upside down bell where the majority of your wealth is stacked on the right side, and then the majority of your we'll say I guess maybe just poor or unable to live, people who are in debt or whatever it may be on the
Hmm.
left side, and then your middle class is just barely scraping by. That's or maybe okay with a couple grand in their pocket. Who's to say? Um, but yeah, the concept of the middle class is it's backwards to what it should be in a healthy economic system. Um,
Yeah, exactly. Because and I would agree completely. Like even in a city, and this is, I mean, I'm sure that you are already aware of some of the systems because you've talked to many people before me. But like even in a city where where basic housing is provided to most citizens, we actually do have a relatively large indigent population. I'm not sure if you're aware.
yeah, I have seen quite a few, both local and immigrants.
Hmm. And
Though it seems like some of the immigrant population is by choice.
it's peculiar. I would say some is by choice. Some may be linked to mental health concerns, and obviously that's a separate ball to untangle.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I obviously look at all the applications when they came in,
Hmm.
and Lexi Narcos, one of the other competitors, who placed homeless by choice on her application. Um, that was an interesting concept, uh, and one to explore further. But yeah, I think you're right. The an interesting ball to untangle, certainly. And I think as far as the local side of things, your idea about what we can do to improve local population health, maybe we'll say broadly,
I would say
um,
yes, mental health, physical health, as well as just general well-being.
well-being, yeah. And then what possibilities there may be otherwise. I have worked only on one instance so far with one of the clerks here for providing housing for someone who was homeless, and it took us maybe 45 minutes to get them into the Alta Street apartments.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, it was a very quick turnaround. I think at some level, the majority of people, and a lot of this just comes from access, whether or not folks are asking the right people or having the right conversations. Again, to your point, the the state provides a lot already. It's whether or not our citizens are aware of what the state provides, and so that's also probably the next big action item for us is how do we begin to let people know that there are um, grants and programs and resources available to them, so they don't have to suffer in silence.
Which I feel like the easiest answer is, well, let's have an outreach program. But then, of course, then it becomes a question of what does that look like? How is it funded? How much would it cost? Things of that nature.
Sure, who would run it?
Exactly.
I mean
Um,
that's an entirely new, possibly government program, and getting approval from the Senate. It does technically fall under the political scope, but it is technically outside the mayor's office, right? So like the concept of the Parks Department, which is kind of by proxy under the mayor's office, but not really. It is its own entity.
I mean, I feel like the most logical place to stage something like that might be at Viceroy because obviously, the indigent population, they're more susceptible to malnourishment, more susceptible to dehydration, more susceptible to exposure to the elements. So they're more likely to come through our front door. If they do, in fact, come through
Mm-hmm.
our front door, if we identify them as indigent, at that point, it may be something as simple as saying, hey, look at this pamphlet. There are programs for you. Visit the Alta Street Apartments. They can get you set up with an apartment in no time.
Right. Yeah, that's a good idea. Do you know Sabbath Cohen? Have you met her yet?
In passing, I mean, I'm sure she wouldn't recognize me. I'm one of many, but yeah, no, I am
Fair.
familiar with her.
Yeah, I am working with her on what kind of improvements we might be able to make for the hospital staff in general.
Hmm.
I would say like even outside of your mayoral run, let's say next week, if no change happens, if this is something that you're still passionate about and want to see, let's talk and see what we can do to maybe create a program if you'd be interested in kind of spearheading from your perspective and maybe finding some other folks. This is something that I absolutely, from my perspective, would support. Obviously, it would be something that I can only advise on, not make decisions on. Um, but I think it would be a good first step. And then again, if it's something that you're running, when the next election comes around, say, hey, even before in office, this was something that we worked on to um, start making the right action steps. Just a food for thought.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be honored to.
Perfect. Yeah, so we can work on that. And we can talk a little bit more offline about it, so to speak, since we've been emailing back and forth a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, I think the working out some of the administrative pieces of that might be easier in that forum, unless we needed to sit down and discuss.
Hmm. I mean,
But
obviously, once it's final, once we're kind of
yeah,
ready to finalize it, we can sit down at that point.
right.
But I would agree, it should be easy enough for us to communicate back and forth by email.
Yeah, I mean, just knocking out some of the early ideas. Um, for now, I mean, is there anything that you need that I could possibly help with as your campaign? Again, I'm not locked into this administration. That if Mickey knew I said that, he'd probably be pissed.
Well, I mean, we'll have to, I suppose, keep that sub rosa.
Well,
Um,
I've been saying this very cautiously to basically every other candidate that I've met so far is like I'm happy to assist because the truth of it is I'm more interested in the health of the city than I am seeing any one individual um, stay in power. I mean, I know things would be easier for this term if he stayed. Um, However, I also know, and I talked to Mayor Emma, or previous former Mayor Emma, before she withdrew, and told her that even if she was reelected, like there would be a lot that we could work on collectively.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
but yeah, again, I'll offer my services. I mean, if there's anything I can help you with, even just ideas, you're more than welcome to ask.
Well, and I'll be entirely honest. Like I'm no idiot. I'm going into this with the firm understanding that my position here is to bring light to things that may not be thought about, like the Clear Act, and also to bring voice to people who feel like they're voiceless. A lot of Shift 3, there's been a very real concern in Shift 3 of who even are our deputy mayors. Where is the mayor? Why don't we ever see
Ah,
them?
representation.
Exactly. That's actually
Wonderful.
been a large part of my campaign is, I'm bringing a voice to the voiceless. I'm going to be the voice for AU, the voice for Shift 3. I mean, there are admittedly two candidates running, myself and Remethy, who are both. I mean, Remethy's a bit earlier. He kind of straddles the line a bit more, a little bit more towards Shift 2. I tend to be kind of like even or more towards Shift 3. So it's more just kind of, like I said, voice of the voiceless. The people who have been screaming into the void now have someone to carry on their voice for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll say to you in this forum, if this is something that doesn't work out in your favor, if you're like if you're not elected,
Here we
let's
go.
say next Monday, whatever
Pause.
the time frame is.
Pause.
If this is something that you're interested in, again, I'm happy to advise because we are in desperate need of AU representation. That is an area that I have been actively, I'll say, recruiting for, discussing with a few other folks in the city. Um, so far, people who have a vested interest in the politics of it have not stepped forward. It's been people who've been interested mostly in the, shall we say, allure of what the position could bring to them. So
Mm.
maybe some power hungry people or um, folks who just want some notoriety. The truth is, if when we move into this next term, um, things are changing inside the administration. If Mayor Mickey's reelected, I'm actually this morning before coming into the city was redrafting the responsibilities and expectations of a deputy.
Oh.
Um, there are legislated responsibilities of the deputy, and then there are going to be basically a job description expectation that I'm working on that basically says if you're going to be deputy, there is an expectation that you will at least be present and accounted for somewhat regularly. Um, for this very reason, right? There isn't
Yeah.
representation in some areas. And I will say to you now, that's not because we don't have an AU deputy. It's because they have chosen not to log in. They don't come here. They don't sign in.
Oh.
Um, and so that is not the fault of this administration's attempts. That is the fault of the individual, and so they are being removed.
Ah. Okay. Yeah. And
It's
no, I
it's unfortunate.
understandably.
It's I would ask that stays here, right? I would
Yeah.
ask
No,
that that stays between the
understandably.
two of us. But um, that's a that is something that we are working on actively to ensure does not happen again, right? We're vetting everyone we're talking to and um, ensuring that the people that are coming on board know what they're getting into. This is not like a strong arm kind of move. This is more like we want to have transparency and set expectations because the truth is the mayor has every right to appoint and remove deputies as they choose.
Well,
They
of
can do
course.
it at will. Um, there have been things inside of this administration that I think just because it would be easier not to address, just haven't been addressed, especially since we're like right here at the end anyway.
Hmm.
It's like let's just make a bunch of executive changes at the start of the next term. That would be easier than trying to like make these changes the week of the election. That doesn't make sense. Um, so those are all of the administrative pieces that I'm working on as one giant changeover that would probably occur at the beginning of next week.
Yeah, absolutely. And I definitely get what you mean by essentially wanting someone who is driven by altruism, or what's the old phrase? The people who want power are the people who should be least trusted with it.
Right.
Because if they
And
want a power for power's sake, then there's a higher chance of corruption from that.
exactly. And so something else that may need to be worked on, and I don't know exactly the scope of this. You're a medical professional, correct?
Correct.
That is a government state sponsored position. What's the correct way to put that? You clock in and you are paid by the state.
Exactly so.
You cannot be clocked into two systems at once.
Exactly, which is why you cannot hold. I think that may be related to the reason why you cannot hold jobs in two different governmental bodies.
That's an area that I also would like to probably try and figure out. If we were to bring you on, let's say as a deputy, that would be an area that would be tough for you, right? If you wanted to say be available at the hospital and also signed in as deputy, because there isn't always deputy work that needs to be done. We wouldn't expect you just to sit here all shift, right?
Yeah,
You can
and
sign
vice
in
versa.
and leave, but if you can't also go do work at the same time, maybe consult or something like that, or maybe we can work with Miss Cohen to figure out some kind of supplementary, like while you would be technically on duty as the deputy, any hours spent working in a moonlighting capacity, or something like that. And obviously, I don't know the legality of operating when not clocked in,
Well, there's
so to
actually
speak.
additional challenges faced there. Um,
Interesting.
I don't know if this is something that you yourself are aware of, and I presume applies similarly to other governmental bodies, although I can't speak to that myself. But there are certain, um, how do I word this? There are certain tools and devices within the hospital which are available to me when I am clocked in as a doctor,
Right.
but once I clock out, I lose access to those tools and devices.
Indeed. Yeah, that would roughly be what I'm referring to.
Hmm.
Um, if there would be a way in which you could be um, signed into both at the same time, that would be something to try and figure out, in the instance that that would be a possibility. Or alternatively, if you were moonlighting just in a consultative capacity at Viceroy, for instance, and maybe you're not actually performing anything, but you're there, you're able to um, train another doctor or something like that. Um, that's hard to say, but those would be things that I'd be interested in helping you explore.
Yeah, absolutely, and that would be a very interesting point to work from.
Indeed.
There
Perfect. Well,
was
this was a
one other
great chat.
thing
Yes. Hmm.
I was wanting to bring up, kind of like
Go ahead.
the third plank of my platform,
Okay.
which is, and it kind of links into what we're talking about, but also or what we were talking about before, but in a different way. There is, and I understand, I understand that there's been some talk around maybe exploring ways to get more jobs. One of the things I was looking at specifically is similar to how in some states they have, like, for lack of a better term, like veterans laws, or uh, differently abled laws, things of that nature, where an individual may not be able to perform most specific jobs because they may have temporarily lost their eyesight or permanently be blinded, not be able to speak, whether temporarily, permanently, so on and so forth, difficulty walking. one of the third plank was essentially finding ways to either create new jobs that they would be able to complete, things that they would be able to do so that they can be gainfully employed and still earning a living, or b investigate some change to the city issued welfare checks that they're able to receive. That way they are
Mm-hmm.
able to better take care of themselves, because let's be honest, I know someone who does get those checks, because you also are eligible to collect them if you're not working at a eligible job, such as like Uwu Cafe or working for the government or what have you.
Right.
And I know that from him, one day he was here for several hours, and his government welfare check only ended up being like $90. $90 doesn't even buy a single entree item at any of those restaurants,
Right.
let alone food and drink, which are necessary for survival.
Yeah, that would be an interesting one to explore as well, right? Some kind of way in which you can classify a civilian as or somebody as, um,
Permanently disabled, essentially.
yeah, exactly. And then under that specific clause, the ability to then collect disability. The other piece that I would add into this is our vault is not currently accessible to those in wheelchairs.
That is very true. Yes, because of the stairs to
Yes.
get in.
I don't know if you know Cassandra Silverton.
Oh yes, no, I know Miss Silverton. She's a wonderful person.
Yeah, I love her. She's great. She's been in a wheelchair recently, and
Yeah.
she has had that issue where she can't collect her paychecks.
Oh,
uh,
jeez.
and and so we've been talking about what possibility there would be of adding ramps. Obviously, we have ramps here at the
Hmm.
courthouse, which is great, so she's able to get in. However, um, there is a desperate need for us to make some of these wheelchair accessibilities to not just things like the vault, but I think places in general. Like I think there is a side door at the Roosters that makes that accessible, but there are other restaurants and facilities that may be less accessible. I believe the door that I'm speaking of, though, at the Roosters is for employees only. So in that instance, she would have to know somebody and be let in the side door if that's what she wanted to do. Otherwise, that's not a place she could patronize.
No,
Um,
absolutely. That they have very intimidating steps, even for an able-bodied person.
yes, I have found that to be true. Um, yeah, I would be interested in figuring out what kind of construction requests there would be, and kind of making a map of locations that need those improvements, because I think
Absolutely.
there are a lot of them in the city. The vault is just the immediate need, because people need to be able to collect. I think this disability piece would be like one great way, and this is where I would say, like, this may not need to be legislation. This may need to be more like city planning as a proposal. Um, but like, this is something that we could absolutely collectively work on. That's a great idea.
I have an idea. It's a bit well, I was gonna say it's a bit avant-garde, but honestly, in the year 2022, hardly so. What if, instead of, obviously, for receipts is one thing, because there has to be a physical turn in. Although,
Hmm.
we could work with that as well. But I know outside of the city, there are many banks and financial institutions, other than
Auto
obviously.
deposit,
Exactly.
direct
Auto
deposit.
deposit, direct
Yeah.
deposit, even
Hmm.
the ability to like scan in your receipts using your phone.
Yeah, that's actually something else that I have discussed a little bit. And I don't know what it would take to necessarily do that. There, and
Hmm.
and the request has been made on two sides with receipts as well. Um, because the employees, I actually had a long conversation with a few employees at Uwu who have on multiple occasions been robbed of their work receipts, who are fed up with being robbed, which I
Yeah,
understand.
and I would agree
Um,
with that. I've not experienced that myself, but I have heard the horror stories. And certainly,
mhm.
if perhaps the system were transitioned from receipts into something like, when you clock in, a time clock is literally counting because there obviously is one in the background doing
Right.
so. When you clock out, the time clock stops, and whatever that time frame, whatever you would have gotten in receipts per se, is simply just converted into cash and direct deposited into your account.
Yeah, I definitely think there are some improvements in that area that can be explored as well. And if that's going to be improved, not just for receipts, it could be, like you said, for this disability check, for the welfare checks, for whatever it may be.
Hmm.
There are plenty of opportunities available to the city, given that we um, approach it appropriately.
Absolutely. And if there's, obviously, if there's some concern around perhaps a person may want to wait until a designated period of time to collect their payment, they would still have the option of going in person or maybe even include in the banking app a button to click to kind of tabulate and deposit at that point, and they can just set it to manually do so in their individual app rather than having it automatic, if that makes sense. Did I lose you? Wait for him to finish reading his phone. It's obviously important.
Yes, it does. Apologies, I needed to correct something on Twitter.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I do love this discussion, however. Yeah. Um, all of this, everything that we have discussed, there are so many updates, one might say, enhancements, improvements,
Hmm.
um, changes. I don't know exactly what we need to call it. Betterments that need to be enacted in the city.
One might say
Um,
quality of life improvements.
Yeah, absolutely. The fact of the matter is, there are quality of life improvements that seem to only come in two spaces. Um, but there are citizens that exist in this city that have been neglected for too long, and I'm here to change that.
Ah, okay, so you're referring to the constantly escalating arms race between cops and crimps.
That would roughly I'm referring to. Yes,
Yeah. And honestly, I mean, this is probably an unpopular take from a mayoral candidate. I am not particularly anti-crim. I'm not particularly anti-cop. I tend to fall in the middle because as a doctor, literally my job is if someone comes through my emergency room, if they're a cop, if they're a crim, if they're a civilian, they get treated. They get brought back to their best possible health, and then they go on with their day, whatever form that may take from there. So in my line of work, I don't have the luxury of saying, "Oh God, crims are evil, you get away from me," or saying, "Oh, I can't stand cops because such and such happened." I need to stand
sure.
in a neutral stance between the two.
Yeah, I stand in a very interesting position in that matter as well. Um, I stand on the side of what one could probably just call morality.
Hmm.
Um, and so I am against immorality and corruption in any form. I tend to hear more about immorality on the police side than I do on the criminal side, which is very strange to me.
Well, I
Um,
mean, it comes down to a thief's honor. Like there tends to be like with honor amongst thieves is what I'm trying to say rather.
sure,
So there tends to be like certain rules and regulations, quote unquote, of the street that in following that, that's their moral code, and as long as they are following that moral code, they're going to say that no, they're good, they're fine. Whereas, I mean, the moral code of the police is much more regimented SOPs, laws, regulations. This is what they must do. And so if you have a cop that, pull someone over. And I actually, unfortunately, have a perfect example of this one, because I am 100% a civilian. I mean, you may have noticed I don't even break traffic laws.
Hmm. Same.
The other night, I had just gotten this haircut, and I was driving back from the clothing store, trying to kind of make sure that the haircut fit with my existing outfits. And I was pulled over, and of course, okay, I see flashing lights, I hear the siren. Okay, I'm going to pull over to the side. Uh, they sit in the car. They wait for a second vehicle, which I know from the people I know who are criminals that means it's a felony stop. Which at that point I'm like, what is going on? I am told to throw the keys out the window, get out of the car, back towards them, am immediately placed in handcuffs and told I'm under arrest, uh, all because they informed me that my car had been reported as stolen, even though it was my personal car that I moved to the city with. And so, after several
Interesting.
minutes of telling them, no, that's my car, they ran the plate, they looked at my ID, they looked me up in the database because I told them I'm a doctor. They had to double check that. They said, oh, no, it looks like there was a mistake. A local must have misreported it. Now, I would understand a local reporting that the car was being stolen if, in fact, like the window was broken, a lockpick was used, activity of that nature. I simply unlocked it using the clicker on my keys, on my key ring, moved into the car, started it, and drove away. So I don't know exactly what happened that night, and I may never know. But it's something very odd happened, is all I know. And the fact that I am a doctor, a known civilian, I don't have so much as a speeding ticket on my record, and that happened to me. I'm treated like a terrorist, quite frankly, in my opinion. I mean, maybe not because I wasn't actually shot in the head, but I mean, I was treated like a wanted criminal, with like an aggressive wanted criminal, when over a what should have been a minor confirmation. Oh no, that's okay. Okay, have a nice day. And I'm treated that way when there's people out there who might have a speeding ticket, might have like a jaywalking ticket, or okay, or they are a crim, but maybe they're reformed, maybe they've changed their ways, and they have to be treated far worse than I am. And I hear stories of them being treated far worse than I am. And I mean, that does play into, like I said, honor amongst thieves. If you talk badly to a gang member, you're going to get shot. If you treat them with respect, you're generally treated with respect. Uh, with the police, that's not always the case. I'm afraid. Unified Police Department, that's not always the case. There's definitely good cops, absolutely 100%. But there are a few apples in the barrel, and it's starting to get a bit putrid.
Interesting. You're not the first person I've heard this from, and so I need to begin putting together a list of um, breach of, I don't know the right way to word this, breach of force, breach of SOPs, something, and I need to better understand what those are before I can do this.
Hmm.
But I need to have a discussion with the commanding officers to basically bring up these instances because it's happened to me actually now twice. Now, one time I was at fault because I took a wide turn and it appeared a little reckless. But the officer said that I'd been drinking and then didn't um, do a breathalyzer.
No breathalyzer, no field sobriety, nothing. Just said, "Oh
Nothing.
no, you're clearly drunk."
Right. And then called someone to come drive my car.
Oh,
I
jeez.
obliged because I just it wasn't really worth in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
However, to me that was maybe not the right approach. So yeah, I need to begin working on, and this is more of a personal project. This is outside the scope of, well, maybe it's not. Maybe it's directly within the scope of what I'm doing in policy. Um, Finding a means of accountability for excessive use of force or I don't know what to call it. Just breach of what SOP should be. I'll find a term for it. Um,
I
but
mean,
that's
ultimately, I would argue in a normal situation in a city that wasn't Los Santos, I would say that would be like involving IA, but that's also, from what I understand,
yeah. It's my understanding that the internal investigations that happen inside their organization are a little flawed. And so before I moved here, I helped to legislate for what they were calling the External Affairs Assembly, and that
hmm
was rejected.
hmm.
So there needs to be a discussion at some point to figure out what we may or may not be able to do.
Yeah, I would agree because I mean, like I said, I'm a civilian. You're a civilian. I'm a civilian. And if we're treated, aggressively, because it tends to be kind of an attitude of, it tends to be kind of an attitude of complete utter criminal scum until proven otherwise. Not even guilty until proven innocent, which is of course already wrong, but complete utter scum until proven halfway decent. And it doesn't matter if you comply, it doesn't matter how polite you are, how kind you are. If you're gonna get that type of reaction, it's a bad. I mean, don't get me wrong, the officers that were involved in my stop, aside from the very direct and very terrorist approach. Once I was in cuffs, I was polite to them, and so they started being very polite to me. Other than holding me for something that was clearly incorrect, but they did eventually apologize and release me.
Yeah, it shouldn't be shoot first, ask questions later though.
Exactly so.
That's what I need to figure out is like what those SOPs are and is there an appropriate de-escalation. If they say roll the windows down and throw the keys out of the car without, and to me a stolen car is not reasonable enough suspicion to warrant a felony stop like that.
I mean, I would agree myself. I'm not a police officer, so I don't know what their actual SOP is. If that is in fact what they are trained and told to do, then maybe that's what needs to be revisited. Because I do agree that is excessive for what exactly the situation was.
Well, and if they ran the plate and it came back as being a stolen vehicle and their first action wasn't to try and call the owner, and I mean that seems to me like they could have just called you and you could have picked up and said, "Hello, I'm in the car in front of you."
Well, and that was the other interesting thing too, is that I mean that was again what was reported. But the way it started was I was sitting at a stop at a red light. The officer pulled into the lane. The initial officer pulled into the lane next to me, was at a stop at the same red light, and then after a period of about 5 to 10 seconds, pulled back behind me and turned on lights and siren. And at which point, once the light turned green, I pulled through the intersection over to the side.
So I wonder if they actually picked up a different vehicle entirely originally for the flag.
That
And then
is possible, or or it could have been a facade. They could have just been, it could have been a matches the description type thing,
yeah,
and then they were
that
just,
even still
fudging
that's
evidence.
unfortunately in cases where it's like hard to prove that kind of stuff. I don't know. I need to wait for my attorney friends to be around so I can discuss with them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it'd be one thing if there was like body cam footage. I'm sure, of course, their
Right.
superiors would be able to request it, but not everyone, not every police officer is driving around with their body cam on, which is, maybe
Sure.
another issue.
Yeah. Understand that as well. Yeah, that's something for me to review. Um, Again, happened to me a couple times. Hearing that it's happened to you, hearing that it's happened to multiple of now my civilian acquaintances, it's becoming a common occurrence that shouldn't be an occurrence.
Hmm.
I don't I don't like that. Anyway, back to the original point though, which is corruption or misuse of um, authority, or I don't know, morality in general. Where I kind of
Hmm.
stand on the matter is I am a very morally good person. Um, and I expect people to have a pretty good moral compass. I understand that some people are criminals because they need to get by in this city.
Absolutely.
Um, and so they may perform criminal actions that are in their minds necessary. I can't fault somebody for feeling like they're backed into a corner and they need to rob somebody to make some money. I understand that. What to me is unacceptable is hurting somebody, and so I am very hard on attempted murder and harm. And so I am the concept of gang violence and gang on gang war, and especially when civilians are caught in the middle, to me is completely unacceptable.
And
So
there I
that's an
definitely
area,
agree.
yeah, that's an area that I plan, whether it's in this term or some other term, that I plan to escalate from my perspective into being a very heavy charge for the people who are committing these crimes. Um, if they want to keep gang on gang violence as a low charge because the people just enjoy it, fine. But if you come for a civilian, if you come for a political official, if you come for somebody who's acting in good faith, then you should do 20 years in prison. That to me is unacceptable.
No,
Very
and
unpopular opinion.
and I mean, yes, in this city especially, that is a very unpopular opinion. But no, I do completely agree, and I would expand that even to locals, because the way that we fix this issue with the way that the locals are reacting to us is by treating them better and by healing the schism.
Yeah.
So I would agree that even like I would even say that we need to have something on the books where willfully killing a local is it's a similar charge to killing an immigrated citizen.
Yeah.
And I mean,
It'd be
obviously,
interesting.
if there is such a thing as self-defense, then that's a conversation we can have at that point. But we need to have something on the books to show that we need to treat our local brethren as the human beings that they are.
It's my understanding that the court has ruled against that concept already, unfortunately, and that
Hmm.
there is already case law in this city that says a local is not acknowledged as a human.
Which I mean, that unfortunately that doesn't surprise me.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of backwards. Not kind of, it's extremely backwards.
Absolutely. I didn't think there would be existing case law for that. Damn it. But yeah, leaving that aside, I agree completely. And I know, and again, I know it's an unpopular opinion, but when you have, not to name any specific names because I haven't done anything recently, but let's say that you have a known criminal, one that has had terrorist charges, threatening to blow up the hospital to take doctors hostage and kill them, and the police department is unable to do anything unless they actually do take action. I mean, that's another thing that we can look at is, at that point, terroristic threats is why is there no framework for handling that?
Yeah. that also is something that needs to be updated, and hopefully I can work on.
Because I know that if a criminal were to come into the hospital, take one of us hostage, take us somewhere, and whether or not they hurt us, that's an automatic terrorism charge. But
Right.
if they threaten to blow up the hospital and everybody in it, but they actually don't do anything, what are they going to do? The police department doesn't do anything.
Yeah, there are laws that need to be revisited. I was actually having this conversation yesterday. Um,
Hmm.
we have existing case law that is, I think, relatively regularly being revisited because court cases are evolving and adapting kind of the way things are um, existing in the city.
Hmm.
There are legislation pieces that exist, however, that are not being updated. And that's something that I also probably need to work on long term. Um, I think outside of that is jurisdictionally who's responsible for overseeing certain cases. I think in instances of terrorism and um, that type of charge in general, there needs to be more structure, I'll say, and responsibility and ownership by whether it's a separate department or a singular department inside the PD or within the FIB who we're trying to enable. There needs to be a couple changes that occur, which at this juncture is kind of like not within the scope of what I'm working on currently, but I know it needs to change.
Fair enough.
I almost feel like I need more people who would be willing to help policy right. But if we did that, we would also need more judges, more senators.
Yeah,
the
at
the
that
amount
point,
of
you're creating the issue of society. The more that
yeah,
you add, the more that you need. The more that you need, the more that you add that you need.
exactly. Yep. So I kind of am now of the impression that like we'll have to take these things in stride. I
Yeah,
think there will always be issues. I think at this point it's just kind of like determining what are the issues that we decide to tackle, and maybe we figure out like what tackle or what do we tackle inside each mayor's term, right? Like what three items do we want to try and tackle inside the term,
yeah.
something
It's
like
just
that.
and that makes perfect sense. It's just like at the hospital. You triage the issues to determine what's the most critical and what can sit on the back burner for a term or two.
Right. Yeah. I think that's where we're at now. I think for me the biggest action items are civilian enhancement broadly, which is going to be things like the new jobs and ensuring safety and that kind of stuff, better pay. Um, PD accountability is another very broad one, and then that's probably all I can handle inside of this term.
I mean, those two combined are uh,
Huge.
well. Not only are they huge, but those two combined are going to create such a quality of life shift that it's
Right.
going to the no matter which mayor ends up putting those forward is going to be remembered as the architect of the golden age.
I hope so. And I hope it comes relatively swiftly. The question is the scope of legislation needed to make these changes happen.
Absolutely. Because I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, with those two, well, I mean, obviously, those are fairly broad. Each of those action items probably stands for several pieces of legislation combined.
Oh, absolutely. There's definitely not just one that would be a catch-all. This would be um, probably a multitude of things to
Absolutely.
begin. And again, this is just the beginning, but it's like where do we start? What are the first pieces that need to go into place to set some of the frameworks and groundwork for us to start making some of the necessary change?
Exactly. But yeah, I feel like that between those, we have a real shot at restoring kind of the equilibrium of the, cop crim civ dynamic that is, as you mentioned before, been thrown wildly out of equilibrium.
Yeah, exactly. Bring back the middle class. Let's bring back the bell curve. We need
Yeah,
it.
bring back the bell curve, and then have, the the hopefully at that point very small indigent and or underemployed population at a very very small point. Have the one percenters as a 1%, and then have the middle class, fill the body of the city, make sure that we are, you know, economically back on the right track.
Indeed. I need some food. I am starving.
All right. Would you like to go get something?
Yes, let's do that.
All
Do
right.
you have a vehicle?
I do.
I also have a vehicle, but I'm not good at driving.
Honestly, it's a more than any city, more than any place I've ever lived, it's a learned behavior. And I say that as having, I attended college in San Fierro, and with all those hills, you would think it would be harder than here, but no.
She looks like she got someplace to be.
Most people tend to. It's always a hurry, always a rush. Hello.
Very much a hurry up and wait kind of mentality.
Oh yes, very much so. I mean, I can't say
I
much.
wish that was the case for me. I feel like I'm always running from meeting to meeting to meeting.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're busy making sure that the business of the society moves forward.
What's strange is yesterday I had two meetings that were for sure supposed to happen, and neither of them happened.
Oh, geez. Which, of course, in their place, you had several others that did.
Exactly. Yeah, it was like in lieu of those other ones, something else inevitably came up.
Do you have any preference where you'd like to go?
Not necessarily. Anywhere is good. I like
All right.
Maldini's, Uwu. Any of those places is good.
I always have a personal preference for Uwu, so we'll go there.
Love it. Let's do it. I do have an affinity for the people there. Some of the people, at least.
Have you had negative interactions with people there?
Um,
Or just kind of neutral, but maybe not on the necessarily the best side of the spectrum?
I don't know how much I should say as a politician.
Oh no! Oh, you're absolutely right. Um,
I love the workers at Uwu Cafe.
I'm not sure we're stopped at a green, but okay. That's just peculiar. Maybe they just don't. Oh, I know what it is. They probably couldn't make out the red light from there, so they just were reading it backwards. No worries.
Yeah, this light throws me. I don't really understand the.
I'll be honest. There's a number of lights in this city that throw me, but I've just learned to navigate around them when possible.
I mean, a five-way intersection is a tough one to begin with, but this one in particular that like splits off in this very weird way where you can't really see what light is supposed to be pointing to what is just oddly infuriating.
Yeah, absolutely. That, and I mean, you've probably noticed this yourself since you are as far as driving, you are a law-abiding citizen. Well, I mean, in every way, but specifically that. Um, the city planners, when they planned out the light timing and patterns, they took a very interesting approach with them. Like, both you and I have lived elsewhere in San Andreas, and I think we can agree that the kind of standard, the kind of gold silver standard of how these things are usually programmed, not exactly what we see here.
Yes. And And this is what I mean. Like you have the green, but then other cars are still going.
Exactly. Well, and part of that is locals, drive very aggressively. Part of that is, in fact, other immigrated citizens, drive extremely aggressively. Like not even defensively, they're just straight up aggressive. When you have individuals that, will go down city streets at 100 plus miles an hour, and that applies to even civilians, cops, criminals, civilians, everybody for the most part seems to drive that way. I actually am. I refer to the way I drive as granny driving because of the people I know and spend time around. Very few of them follow the traffic laws the way I do.
Yeah, I have found that to be the case even with some of the folks that I hang around with who work more in a legal capacity. That
Hmm.
was aggressive. Yeah,
Yeah.
even some of those folks don't drive similarly. I try to obey the traffic laws. The weirdest part for me is there are times at which the buttons on my dash confuse me in my new vehicle, and that'll
Hmm.
be like the one reason I might run a red light.
Yeah. That makes sense.
All right,
Okay. Well, then we will move up.
that was
Um.
strange.
Yes. Yes, it was. Um. But yeah, it's all one of those things that you get used to, and you kind of as you've lived here for a while, you'll kind of develop a driving style and a way of driving that will make sense to you, and because it's not the standard 10 and 2 or 9 and 3 if you were taught that way, like in other cities, it's you have to feel it out a little bit more,
Mm-hmm.
and as you get used to it, you'll find that you'll get a lot better at it, especially since you get used to that
Wow,
too.
that reckless driving by a delivery truck.
Well, in fairness, while it is a branded vehicle, a large number of their delivery drivers are actually temporary workers.
Oh, okay, that's good to know. Not actually employed by the business.
Exactly. So you'll find a number of people that are driving around recklessly like that. If you were to call up Dodo and say, hey, your driver is doing this and that, they could very easily say, what driver? They're not our employee.
Hmm.
Unless if it's a Dodo Express, that's a little different. You have to actually be employed to do Dodo Express. But standard
Help,
Dodo.
help, 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 help. I'm being triple
Hey, no,
kidnapped.
it's okay.
He has blue hair.
Alright, thank you so much. And I hope you have an amazing day. Take care.
Hope you too as well. If you ever need anything, let me know.
I
Alright.
just realized I have food in my pocket, but we're not gonna do that.
Kawaii curry combo, please.
Yeah. Second. All right. That'll be 300 before.
So you've spent a lot of time here, you said?
I've spent a good amount of time here. Yeah, I'm good friends with Jeanette and Ava, and I'm slowly getting to know some of the other employees and value their opinions on some of the things that I'm working on. So
Alrighty.
Oh, absolutely excellent.
Hey,
Yeah, Jeanette's a great
yeah.
person. I love her to pieces. She
yeah.
volunteers at the hospital. She's working on an expungement for her past misdeeds, and she volunteers at the hospital while she's working towards becoming a dispatcher.
Yeah, 600 before.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I actually one of our conversations in a weird way started out as actually when I met her, she was talking about the election, the upcoming election, and
Mm-hmm.
not knowing what was going on with Mickey,
Mm-hmm.
and not really feeling comfortable voting for him and who she was going to vote for, and I just started by asking why.
Oh, how could
Fair
I
enough.
miss-
What do you want? This is on me.
Um, I'll do a filling combo.
Make
What
that
was
too?
that? Sorry, I can't hear you.
Oh,
Get
sorry. I'll
2
do.
filling combos.
Oh, 2 filling combos? Got. All right, that'll be 600 before tax. Do you
There
guys
you
mind
are.
if you wait a little bit? I have to make some. We just had a
Sure.
rush of customers.
Yeah,
Oh
absolutely.
no,
Take
absolutely,
your
you're
time.
fine.
Yeah. So anyway, we were kind of just talking about like what's been going on in the city in general, and some of her frustrations with stuff, and I introduced myself and kind of what my goal was and why I came to
Mm-hmm.
the city, and she had no idea really what was going on, and it's basically that's the whole situation in general is a lot of people don't know or and I think are still learning that this is a new area, I guess, that there is a
Mm-hmm.
political advisor, that there's someone here whose purpose is to help not just the mayor, but also the citizens and civilians, and I say citizens broadly because it really should be for everybody. But my personal goal is for civilians. That's where my
Yeah.
heart is. And then for people like her, right, who are trying to make a name for herself and get things back in order. Um,
All right, your food's in the tray.
Awesome.
All
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much.
No problem.
Go ahead and take yours first.
Hello, sir. How can I help you?
Hey, can I get to charismatic curry combo meal, please?
Yes. All right, 600 before tax.
If you're having trouble reaching in, sometimes you
I
have
need
to get
make
kind of a
2
little
the
bit more
sides real
this
quick.
way.
Just give me a
Okay.
Oh, there you
yeah,
go.
No worries.
Yeah, I definitely had to move over.
Yeah, it definitely happens. But yeah, honestly, I'm really glad to see. I'm really glad that you had a chance to talk to Jeanette. Ava as well. I've worked with her a couple times here. Haven't seen her around the hospital as much, but I think that's because she's usually a bit earlier at the hospital.
Nice and fresh. Very nice.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Have a
Yeah,
wonderful day.
they both have had some really valuable input, especially for like things they would like to see in the city, stuff that is good, things that are bad, and I'm more than willing to hear basically any complaint. With Jeanette, what's great is what started out as kind of a maybe a complaint turned into an opportunity for a new business. And
Hmm.
so I kind of was able to workshop some ideas with her, and then yesterday she sent me a full business proposal that is
Oh
getting
wow.
submitted. I read through it and gave some feedback, and honestly, it's fantastic. And so she's submitting it to the mayor's office, and I mean it honestly could be really really good as like a civilian only job, and could bring some again equilibrium to this middle class area, and it's specifically related to like the material side of things versus like cash payouts,
Oh wow.
which is a really unique space. And it was completely her idea. I just kind of like helped her get to where it needed to be, like as a fully formed idea. But it started out as like I don't know what's going on with Mayor Mickey. I don't know what's going on in the city. And before we knew it, it was business ideas, good friendship, and yeah, I think that's what I love about this city is like everybody has something to offer if they're encouraged to bring their ideas forward, and rather than discouraged into thinking that they serve no purpose, or maybe they're just here as a tool, which is something that I was sitting in this very cafe talking to Ad and Sherry a couple weeks ago
Hmm.
about how a lot of the civilians feel like they're just a tool for either the PD or for the criminal population. That needs to change.
I mean that assessment doesn't. I would have to agree with it, to be honest. It does tend to. I does tend to feel a lot like, even as a doctor, that my job is to treat a constant flow of patients from both sides of a shootout. I'll have several cops and several criminals all come in at once, and I'm treating both so that they can get up and keep playing cops and robbers, so to speak.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
Yeah,
But
and
I guess it happens.
yeah, and I mean, honestly, that part is probably going to happen as long as there still is crime, which I think that the
Sure.
day that crime is completely eradicated and no one does a crime ever again is probably the day that the entire world implodes on itself.
Right. Yeah. I don't know that this city would continue to exist. But
Yeah, no, this city
I
would
understand.
become like a token,
A
like five
wasteland.
police. No, I mean I could see it as being like a token of like 5 to 10 police. Oh,
Oh wow. Okay.
um, that was exciting. I haven't seen that directly in front of me before.
I was not looking. What happened?
There was a large explosion,
Oh god.
something
Okay,
sort
I
of
saw
like
that.
that.
Yeah.
Except the first one was a bit more of a, shoom boom.
Hey, brother man.
Hello.
It was
Charismatic combo, please.
I think things might be popping off here. Would you like to go somewhere else?
Yeah. We can dip.
Would you like to go back to the mayor's office, or did you have somewhere you'd like to go?
Yeah, we can go back there. That's fine.
Okay.
What I mean, like, what was that?
I'm not entirely sure, if I'm being honest with you.
Okay. Okay.
Two vehicles.
Okay.
Oh,
Is everybody
Really?
okay over here?
I am great.
Yeah.
Hey, that guy has blue hair.
Ah, yes, I do.
Wow, he's
Yeah,
so
it's blue
unique. Yes, the young people. I never. Is always something new, you know.
Me. Help me. Help
Is
me.
is this guy good?
Always, man. The guy screaming, "Help me!"
Yeah. What's
Yeah, he's
what's his
fine.
deal? Okay.
Oh, he's okay. He got cursed by a gay witch.
Oh,
Oddly specific.
yeah, that was my first thought as well.
Yes, apparently that is haram, but all witches are haram, not just the gay ones.
Yeah.
Hey, my car.
Yes.
Correct.
But shooting them is halal. I'm learning.
Ah, correct.
Yes.
All right.
Hello.
Well, we have to adjourn, but good meeting you all.
Okay, adjourn away.
Have a good day. Be safe.
Bye bye.
Don't forget to vote.
Goodbye, Blue.
Some what tickets?
Wait, what?
You call him Blue?
Which concert?
Yes. Why is that inappropriate? He is a blue hair. Why? He is a blue. Yeah, no, he is blue. He is blue hair. He gets it.
No thanks.
What is wrong with hair blue?
That was very strange.
Yes, peculiar. Absolutely, very much so.
I will see if my lady love is back.
Did I hear correctly? Did he say a gay witch?
That did seem to be the term he said. Yes. I mean,
Don't
I
know
mean,
why
at
that
least
matters.
it sounded like he was using it as an identifier, and not as a pejorative.
At least that's good, but I don't know why it matters. Like, are we supposed to be on the lookout for a witch, first of all, and then secondly, like, we'll know it's like which witch, like its sexuality,
I mean, that does sound a little confusing.
which witch.
I mean, unless we run into a person who is both A, wearing a witch's hat, and B, also wearing a large amount of rainbow jewelry.
Right, it's like particularly flamboyant and toting their pride. Like,
I mean, I
openly.
wouldn't even see necessarily flamboyant. I've known a number of flamboyant heterosexual men.
That's true.
And
Yeah.
I've known a number of quote unquote straight passing gay men.
Yeah, I'm just confused by that whole
The entire
interaction. Like, what
yeah.
am I supposed to take away from that?
I think that the takeaway that I usually use when I'm in a situation like that, or rather the reaction I normally use in a situation like that, is smile, nod, and move away slowly.
Yeah, that's basically. I was like, all right, well, we have to adjourn.
We must
have
go.
business to talk to.
We must go. Thank you very much for your time and conversation.
I liked how you were like, go vote.
Yeah, I'm not going to
These are my
suggest
constituents.
these are the I mean, we are still in shift 3. These are the people that I'm saying I want to give a voice to. Even
Yeah,
when
it
that
is. It
voice is
is
there is a
on
gay
his
witch.
side.
What's that?
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, what was that?
Nothing.
Oh, okay. I think he hot mic'd.
Yes, I got to figure out what the next action items are. I came to the city way earlier than I intended. I have to be here at 6 p.m. tonight as well.
Oh, geez, that is a long day for you, sir.
I honestly think after, and I need to probably have another meeting this morning because I do see a couple of people I need to meet with are around, which is unique because I haven't been able to meet with one of them in almost a month.
Oh my
Um,
goodness.
yep. And then I'll probably dip out of the city for like probably until tsunami. Honestly, I don't see a need to come back.
That's
I
fair
do need
enough.
to meet with the troopers at some point, but I don't know if that's gonna happen.
Oh, by the way, I did have one question. I'm not sure,
Yes.
obviously a lot of our conversation has been, going forward and less about, the current administration. But
Hmm.
I did have one question about a certain piece of legislation that Mayor
Sure.
Mickey's office is proposing.
Okay.
What I've been kind of, I don't know if there is an official name yet, but what I've been kind of referring to as the social karma app.
Yes, Mickey's social credit score that he's been touting as a ridiculous version of what's going on in the Communist Party in China.
So I mean, on the one hand, I see a potential there. I see a potential for, acknowledging and rewarding civilians that, don't do crime. Even though, that's literally the bare minimum of we live in a society.
Hmm.
At the same time, obviously, at this point, there's plenty of people who do not, in fact, follow that.
Right.
That being said, I feel like that there's more opportunities to misimplement that based on the way it's
Yes.
worded and written.
Absolutely. So that's an interesting one, and something that in its original draft form, um,
Mm-hmm.
I'll talk about it this way. There's two ways in which this was originally scoped. The way in which Mayor Mickey worded it to me, the way it was originally brought up before I came into the city, that I only found out about after moving to the city and talking with the person who it originally was brought up by, who is Sheriff Calpred. Um, and then the way in which I'm writing it because it'll actually benefit the city. So so I'll give you the breakdown of the three.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Mayor Mickey's idea is some kind of app that ranks civilians. I don't know that a civilian rank is necessary to tell you how good of a civilian you are.
I'm confused. Like I mean, if the base level of this entire ranking is don't do crime, like I mean, is it like ranking people who have not done crime for the longest, or it's been the longest since the last time they did a crime?
See, that's the part that I think is like not just hard to implement, but not really reasonable to implement.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think his idea is based more on like the what would kind of come later. Um, the types of civilian exclusive jobs that we want to create, like your quality and skill at those jobs would make you more eligible for other jobs, if that makes sense.
Ah,
Um,
okay. So
yeah,
the ranking is less about, how long you've been not a crim and is more
correct.
about, we've assigned you this job within this department that we created for civilian onlys. Uh,
Right.
how well are you doing at that job? Okay, well that qualifies you to maybe move into something else.
Yeah, think more like ranking in the PD. There's so many ways in which you can move up through, you're a cadet, then you become a deputy or whatever the appropriate phrasing is, just basic officer, and then you can become lieutenants and corporals and move all the way up through the hierarchy, and I don't know all the military rankings in such manner, but there's always this level of attainability to like the next thing. Within the concept of this app is like what benefits are there for a civilian other than you can get a job at Uwu Cafe and maybe you work as a just a random associate at first, and then you become a floor manager, and that's fine, but you're working for an individualized business. You're not like necessarily gaining any kind of structure for being a civilian in general. The concept of this app would create civilian specific jobs that would say probably be more focused on local jobs. And this is actually where Jeanette's idea comes in, that would be like awesome, is if we could create an app that because you have a criminal record, you don't have access to this app. Because you're a government employee, specifically a law enforcement officer, you don't have access to this app. If you are a civilian with no criminal record and you are not logged in as or signed in to your role as a lawyer or a judge or whatever, you do have access to this app because you are a civilian and not operating in a government employee kind of capacity. And so therefore you can, like people are running Dodo now, you can instead of having to go sign up for those jobs, you can open the app, and we already kind of have a basis for this, right? Because we have our app that we can sign up for jobs for on our phone. This would just kind of make there be some more exclusive opportunities for being a civilian. And then outside of that, there would be some additional benefits that I'm proposing, things like tax breaks. As a civilian who doesn't do crime, maybe you should get a tax break on having a business, especially since this doesn't work in our favor most of the time, or paying for certain goods or whatever it may be. I don't know what that would necessarily look like, but the benefit is, and this is I've heard both sides of it, right there. I heard from someone after the last town hall where we announced it and we were kind of talking about it. This was the EU town hall. Somebody who said, well, what does this mean for someone like me who kind of is sitting between two worlds? I have a criminal record. I don't really have an intention to get it expunged because I'm part of a family that sometimes wants to go do fun things, but I'm not really a part of that family, so I don't really do a bunch of those activities, so I'm mostly clean. I said, well, unfortunately, you wouldn't be eligible, right? You've chosen a life that is going to make you ineligible for this stuff. The incentive would be go get an expungement. Then you would be eligible for all of this work and beyond. The incentive is don't do crime, right? As a politician, I'm incentivizing you to be a clean civilian of Los Santos. I want people of Los Santos to be able to like do these jobs and have access to a different materials game. And actually, in her proposal, in Jeanette's proposal, the payout for materials would be higher, a little bit higher than it would be if you were like a criminal running sanitation or something. And so the idea is you get the benefit of having access to this other opportunity. That doesn't mean that you don't still run those other things, because we would try and make it an exclusive job you could only run periodically, right? You couldn't do it all the time. Because the other thing is, like, for the sake of an equilibrium, you don't want to try and like over flood one side of the market or make things way out of whack. You got to keep things relatively stable, but at least giving a benefit to somebody to say, hey, now there's this new job, also I'm going to get a little bit of a better payout from it. And now there's always pushback whenever we're talking about stuff like this. People are a little bit concerned, and I understand why, because people are robbed all the time. But at the same time, like the best we can do is like provide these opportunities and just hope that like maybe you go with some people who are like run this job with people who are
Eskia,
running
I'll get
guns
on that after this
or,
conversation, I promise.
making the PD aware that you're about to do it. I don't know the full scope of it yet, but the idea in general is like trying to make things more accessible for civilians specifically. Outside of that, we're trying to give priority access to 911. We're also trying to give priority access for something like court case scheduling, and Jeanette's example is a perfect example where you may have had a charge placed on you that you pled not guilty to. But then it takes 60 days. You only have 60 days to try and schedule a case, and that doesn't ever happen, and so the charge sticks. Well, then you've got a criminal record. Sure, of course. Right. Exactly. Mhm. Yeah, exactly. Y- Yep, exactly. And I think that's where there's kind of this other piece of legislation I'm working on that would hopefully help clear some docket cases. There has also been an update to the DOJ for scheduling that hopefully is going to help remedy that. That's outside of what I'm working on, but basically getting the judges paid bonuses based on completed cases, which incentivizes them to do the work and get the cases completed. um, right. Exactly. Yep. And so that's kind of like again, there's a lot of moving parts to make this all work, but at the end of the day, it really should benefit the civilians and those who are trying to clean things up. Um, and again, this is kind of like a long-term aspiration, right? Because it is DOJ focused, it is civilian focused, it is ensuring that PD is held accountable to like not bolstering charges when there shouldn't be charges. Like this is all one giant scheme to ensure that the civilians of Los Santos are safe and secured and not treated like criminals when we're not. So it's, I mean, it's all like my primary undertaking. Um, it's a very big task. I understand it, but it's also necessary. Um, and that's kind of like, again, part of the reason why outside of Mickey's administration, I'm happy to continue to work for him, but I cannot, as the type of politician that I desire to be, I cannot tie myself just to one organization. I cannot tie myself just to his administration because this work is too important to die in 60 days or next week. Right. Yeah, I'm not willing to do that. Yeah, and so I'm trying to figure out what the full scope of this needs to look like, even in my kind of position, right? As a private politician, there's only so much I can do, right? I can influence, I cannot control. The influence that I have is only going to be based on the conversations that I have. It's going to be, does the mayor want to listen to my input? Do the deputies actually need the help that they say they need? Um, does the DOJ take what I say as being valuable? Those kinds of things. Would the Senate appreciate the types of conversations we're having? And then the flip side of that is, do we see that there's a need for a new position? Would the city value like an actual government position for this that is independent, that is long term, that's outside of the Senate? And those are, because this is a new area that the city has literally never seen a long term politician mentality, right? Someone whose goal is to see the city improvement, um, like we're kind of vying for. Um, that's where this kind of is such a greenfield area where we're not really sure what it looks like. I know the easy solution right now is just privatize, stay a business consultant or stay a political consultant through my business, and then um, basically just tell whatever administration's in office, take it or leave it. I'm going to keep working on it anyway, and then I have a direct in with the DOJ to get things submitted, which means I can kind of circumvent the mayor if I need to. However, it still technically has to go through the mayor's office at some point. Right. Mm-hmm. Sure. Hopefully. Yeah, I'm trying to. Whether or not the um, Senate would desire something like this or not is to be determined. I just know that this is, again, I'm still relatively new to the city. I just know that like what we've been able to accomplish so far in partnership with Mayor Mickey, in partnership with what we're trying to do for this term, it is a short-term solution to a long-term goal. Um, Again, whether or not it's something that needs to be regulated, whether we need to create like a legislative position, or we need to create some kind of level of autonomy in doing this, or like, oh, by the way, now we have somebody who is experienced. You should consult with this person. I don't know. I don't know what that looks like. I can say as a consultant, and with a consultant's background, regardless of who's running, um, my goal is to meet with basically as many of the running mates that who would, or I guess who would be
All right, I'll
in
be
any
here
kind of
for a
election
little bit
cycle,
longer at
and just
least.
offer my services, and kind of talk about what we've been working on, what we're trying to accomplish. I'll like talk about how we could align together and ally together, and hope that they see value in it. Because at the end of the day, if I end up going up against somebody who doesn't feel like there's a value, or that we would benefit each other, then I'm not sure that person would actually make a good mayor, from my perspective. And so, from my perspective, I would probably start counter campaigning against that person and for someone else who was running that I think would better fit. Yeah, I have said this before, um, too often yesterday. I'll say it again to you. I certainly don't intend to think too highly of myself in this regard, but I also recognize that in this city, there are not many people with the type of experience or background that I have. So, what I'm offering is not a, hey, I do it the right way, or this is the only way to do it. All I can offer is this is a way to do it, and I'm happy to do it in this way or find a new way together to try and accomplish our mutual goals. Um, and at the same time, work from a place of humility as much as I possibly can. Yeah, well, and again, this kind of goes down to from my perspective, who do I
I'm
think
getting
would
too
be an
tired. I'm starting
asset,
to
right?
stumble
And
my
again,
words worse than normal.
as a consultant, I have influence, not control. And so like understanding that as a sphere of influence, all I can ever and like I learned this a long time ago. I actually come from a background of sales consultation prior to moving into politics and prior to moving into the type of engineering work that I did even previously to this. Um, so like having this type of background that you know you can never control somebody into the types of positions that you want to, but you can certainly provide the information. You can provide the why it would be beneficial, and again, having the mentality of like this would be mutually beneficial to both of us. This would be for the betterment of the city. The only thing, and I'm saying this from the perspective of I also know who I work for, and I know Mickey can be extremely arrogant at times. um if you've ever interacted with him or seen him on stage, god forbid you see him on stage. Ah, yes. Uh-huh. Yeah, things like that are like completely outrageous. To me that's like okay, yes, I technically work for your administration in the capacity that I'm advising you. um I would advise you not to say that. If you're going to say stuff like that, then like again, I can't control that kind of stuff. However, the things that I can control is when you give me the idea that is what actually has the roots to be a good idea. Again, like what he called the social credit score is a bad idea, but it has the roots to be a good idea if it's written the right way. And so like taking those ideas and expanding on them and working on them in the type of way that I think he'll still have the outcome that he wants, which is and I think part of this is like working with him in the type of way that's like what you really want. You're wording it in such a manner that you think like communism is good, which it's not. um but what you're really saying is you want civilians to have better access to stuff. That's what you're really saying. And like not trying to like force him into that mindset, but like trying to like extrapolate from him what he's really meaning. um exactly. And so that's where like that's kind of my job, right? I let other people have the big ideas. And again, he's a very charismatic leader. He's very outspoken. He does a really good job of kind of towing that line of making a big scene, but not really crossing the line, or at least hasn't yet, so far. Um, while at the same time giving me the autonomy, and he's kind of put a lot of faith in me, which is great. I don't know that every future administration would, which I again understand, I respect. But he's put a lot of faith in me to build out some of these things and then just let him cross his desk. And then again, he reads it, he submits it, and again, it does have to go through the mayor's office to be submitted into legislation in the first place.
Of
Which is
course.
why at the end of the day, I can't say screw you, I'm going to do it on my own. I have to be working with the mayor. However, I know that during every election season and election cycle, I will need to know who the candidates are, get a feel for who I think would be a good representation. And this is part of the reason why I'm not like overly or overtly campaigning for him. Yes, I have sent out some twats that support him, but that's because he's the candidate that I have known so far. Mostly, everything that I have said is go vote. Um, I just want to see whoever is in this position have the same kind of mentality that I do, which is the city needs to continue to have improvements. And so far, I don't think I've come across anybody who doesn't mostly want that. At least not that anyone in the city takes seriously. Anybody who takes one of those kinds of candidates in any kind of capacity as um, a joke, uh, is not a threat at the end of the day. It's like you can just kind of call them the write-off, smooth brain. They're here to kind of stir the pot in a bad way, but at the end of the day, they're not really gonna do anything for what we're trying to accomplish. Right. Outside of this term is to see what happens in the next election. I almost, and I'm not saying this to sound overly arrogant or confident that he's a shoo-in for this election. I just kind of expect, because of his name and notoriety, that he will win. That's just I expect it at this point. But for the next election, and again, this is going to be kind of based on what we can accomplish in this election and the ability that, or either the ability or a lack of ability that I may or may not have of getting my name out there as the advisor and consultant working with the administration. It'll be interesting to see who may want my backing in the next election, for the very reasons you just talked about, right? Like, if there's not someone who's extremely charismatic, or doesn't have the same skill set or notoriety or whatever, if it would be an asset to try and ally and say, oh, by the way, my running mate is Sloan Kelly, who made the Mayor Mickey administration effective. Like, if that would be something of value. I don't know. That's something I'm just thinking about in this moment. I don't know that that would be something that I would want to do, again, privately operated, but it would be interesting to see if that ever came to that point. Yeah, go ahead. It's a good conversation. I don't care as many thoughts as you got. Go for it. I have not. Mm-hmm. Right. That sounds correct. Yes. It's it doesn't give candidates an appropriate chance, especially in an instance of a re-election. Yeah, I think that's another area that needs to be addressed, because elections so far in this city have been, I think, to your point, poorly organized. It's my understanding the last time they did a debate, it was organized by an outside third-party organization, not by anyone at City Hall. Sure. Right. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, and that's the part that I guess maybe should be discussed is like who would be interested in trying to host one this time. I don't know who it would be, honestly. Um, Unfortunately, I haven't met enough of the business folks in the city to know who would help support something like that. Um, who's that? Okay. I have yet to meet anyone from Cerberus. Yeah, I mean most of my time is spent between the apartment and here. I don't really have a reason to go outside of that, other than to meet people who are interested in meeting with me, and mostly it's the civilian population so far. Um, I'm a politician, not a business person, technically by nature, so I've had no reason to really interact with anyone from there. Ah, okay. Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah, I think there only ended up being one debate in the last election as well. So it wasn't really super. I don't know that it was super formal. This may be something that I can ask Judge Crane about, because I think he helped moderate it. So yeah, that might be a good starting point for me. I'll see if that's something he wants to help organize. Doing both. Yeah, that's actually a good idea. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've seen Saren's name on a lot of things. Yeah, the only feedback I've heard is that he's kind of still relatively new-ish, and so most people want him to have some more experience. But otherwise, I don't think that there would be an issue, and I think he's doing a pretty good job so far. Exactly. Right. Yeah, that was almost my exact feedback. I said it like I don't know that I necessarily care that he's not super well seasoned, but if he's coachable, then that should be enough. Because it seems like our judges so far are ready and willing to coach. And so if they're going to coach and be willing to coach, then and he's accessible for coaching, then we might as well at least put him in that kind of position. And I think the response to that was pretty good. So hopefully that's the case. Agreed. Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. That would roughly be what I'm referring to by people who don't really take that seriously. I hope that's one of those instances. Um, when I'll put it this way: when I met Sheriff Pred a few weeks ago, he introduced himself and said, "I just got out of prison for attempted murder. I spent 3 years in prison." Yes. The what part? Speculation, of course. Okay. So evidence tampering. Yes. That is disappointing. Mm-hmm. Indeed. I need to go back and look at more of those cases. Interesting. Hmm. No, that's good information. I needed to know that. I am supposed to begin meeting with High Command soon, and I need to have a follow up with him. But before I do, I think maybe there's some more information I need to gather. Oh no, that's fine. I welcome it. The more I can learn, the better. Rather than walking into these things blind. Awesome. Well, Kyle, it's been a pleasure. I am going to try and run to another meeting before I have to jump out of the city. And I appreciate you taking some time this morning. I know you're probably ready for bed, but this was a great conversation. It was. Yeah, same. And definitely let's work together via email on some ideas. And again, if not elected, I'm happy to advise Mayor Mickey on your possible candidacy as deputy for the AU region. That's good to know. Awesome. Well, thank you, sir. And if there's anything you need, you've got my contact information. Hold on to it and just keep me posted. I'm happy to be an asset and resource for you as well. Perfect. Yeah, I'll say probably the biggest thing I'll need, and I don't know that it'll be necessarily inside this term, but sometime in the near future, I need to begin making some connections at the hospital. So it's good to have the connection, the direct in over there. So I'll be reaching out about some things. Yes, exactly. Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Ben. And then we'll be in touch otherwise. Thanks, you too.
So that was a whole ass thing. I knew it was going to be a meeting. I didn't realize that it was going to be 2 hours. But you know what? As I said, it was damn good. A lot of good information. Sounds like I probably got him a couple meta unlocks. He got me some meta unlocks. So good, productive. And now we know that, you know, when, because I'm convinced it's when, not if, when I lose the mayoral race, I just went from maybe Senpai will notice me to Sloan's literally gonna drop in Mickey's ear, hey, I got a good candidate for you. So that's good stuff. Lot of information to kind of unpack. But all good, all good. I mean, I went into this kind of hopeful. And I'm coming out of this saying, hey, you know, this guy actually does seem to care. He's got some great ideas. Admittedly, he's, you know, outsourcing him from the entire city, but that's useful because he's new to the city. There's a lot of good shit happening here. And if he thinks that Kyle's going to be useful in the process of, you know, putting this through to try and make the city better, to bring in, as I called it earlier, the golden age of Los Santos, hell yeah, I'm on board. I mean, are we ever going to hit a truly peaceful, truly 100% peace and love and everything else, Los Santos? God, no. Like we said earlier, the city would literally implode if we hit a zero crim city. If we hit a 100% peaceful city. There's no way in hell that's ever happening. But if we can get to a place where, you know, things are better, not perfect, but better, that's kind of goals. And I'm here for it. And doubly so if that means I get to be part
Give me the.
of it. So that was part 2 for tonight. I'll be honest, I had just logged out because I'd kind of given up that we were going to do anything tonight. But then, as I'm sitting there relaxing, kind of winding down for bed, I get an email saying, hey, I came into the city a little early. Are you available? So I was like, hell yeah. And that's why we jumped back on. After having already said goodnight for the night. This time, though, for real goodnight, we are going to be stopping, and I am going to be going directly to bed, passing out, being done with today in full. As I said before on the first half of the stream, tonight's stream, yeah, it is tonight now. We are definitely, the sun is up, it is 100% Wednesday. Tonight's stream is going to be Front Row Geeks first, so we're not going to be entering the city until after Tsunami. That being said, obviously, thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you for coming back for the second half of the night. I hope you have a wonderful evening, day, morning, whatever your time zone is. Be safe out there. Take care of yourselves, and we will see you next time.